Before I get to all the serious business of war and all that jazz, I need to share with you just a little story about anti-Israel lefties getting a very big mugging by reality. By now, of course, everybody is well familiar with climate crusader Greta Thunberg and her attempt to sail to Gaza to, quote-unquote, block the blockade. Well, Israel responded to this effort with a hearty, "How dare you!" and kicked her out of the country, sending her home in that back row of the plane, in that back row that doesn't recline, stuck next to the galley and the toot. Hope you had a nice flight, Greta, and well done, Israel. 10-10, no notes, as the kids say. But oddly, this cautionary tale hasn't stopped others from trying their hand at a little terrorism of themselves. Meet the geniuses behind something called the Global March to Gaza. Yes, that's right, you heard correctly, who have decided that it would be a real swell idea at a high old time to fly to Egypt and from there try to march into the Gaza Strip on foot to open up the territory to humanitarian relief. Here you see some of their supporters cheering those heading off from Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. And boy, that guy in the blue shirt, look at him there on the right, he really looks like he'd be a lot of fun at parties. But, of course, these guys forget that not long after the October 7th attacks, Egypt sealed its border with Gaza. Why? Well, because they didn't want to wind up like Lebanon did in 1970, or later than that, or Jordan in 1970, or anywhere else. The Palestinians and the PLO went to spread their special sunshine across the Middle East. So how do you think the Egyptians reacted to these silly white Western liberals presuming to undo their own blockade of Gaza? About as well as you would expect. Yes, that's right. Everyday Egyptians decided that they would beat the ever-loving you-know-what out of these activists with belts and shoes and whatever else they had to hand. Not to be outdone, Egyptian officials themselves were not too pleased either.
There's people in masks. There's people in masks. Please, someone screen record this. There's people in masks dragging people out.
I'm sorry, but can these people just decide whether or not they like masks or not? Honestly, it's so hard to keep up these days. But anyway, what's the old expression about it taking a heart of stone not to laugh at this stuff? Well, here's more from one of the participants.
This is an emergency. We have just been violently dragged into the buses here at the first checkpoint on the way to Ismailia. We were sitting quietly and not doing anything. We were debating that we would leave soon in taxis back to Cairo because we did not break any law. And all of a sudden, several people stormed in and they started to push people and drag them violently outside.
Anyway, finally, the mob said farewell in the classy manner for which the activist left is known. Here they are saying farewell to Egypt with a song.
Israel! You Israel! You Egypt! You Egypt!
Anywho, the reason I bring this up is because you know this really just feels like a progressive version of European colonialism, with the great white saviors coming down from the continent to tell the Egyptians how to run their country and their border. But guess what? Our European friends wound up on the pointy end of decolonization as the Egyptians told them, quite rightly, what's the saying? Go back where you came from. Right, on to more serious business. Well, on Saturday, I had a great opportunity, and I'd like to thank the U.S. Embassy in Canberra for inviting me along to visit the USS America. Admiral Tom Schultz, American Chargé d'Affaires Erica Olson, and everyone aboard the ship were incredibly generous in showing us life aboard this amphibious assault craft, normally based in Japan, that is paying a visit to Sydney in Australia and is understood that it's going to be taking place with America and a bunch of other ships as part of the Operation Talisman Sabre coming up. Now, right now, around 4,500 sailors and Marines are in town in Sydney, and I tell you what, if you meet any of them, have a beer with them. They are incredible, mostly young people doing a hell of a job. And they will be, I have to say, potentially on the front line, very likely, of any future conflict that breaks out in the Pacific. Now, that's why I bring this up, because this visit here that I was part of, it is part of the close Australian-American alliance. It represents this, one which our own Prime Minister, however, Anthony Albanese, has been, well, rubbishing just a little bit lately for his own domestic political purposes. Recall what the Prime Minister said just the other day at the National Press Club in a sidelong shot at American values and the American president.
And Australians voted against importing conflicts and ideologies that have no basis in our national culture or character. They rejected policies copied from overseas that would only leave us a smaller, narrower, less generous and more divided country. Instead, our people chose to face global challenges in the Australian way.
And we know exactly what he meant and who he meant by that. I don't think Albanese was too concerned with Chinese Communist Party influence operations in Australia. No, he was talking about the US of A. Now, of course, after all that, I hope Donald Trump doesn't watch the press club, because the Prime Minister has jetted off to meet, we presume, and I think it's now been confirmed on Tuesday, and this is going to happen, meet with U.S. President Donald Trump at the G7, where Australia's defense spending budget will surely come up. And it struck me as I was toured around the aircraft on this ship that I was on, including the F-35Bs, which one aviator told me were like magic to fly, that they were so advanced, that defense is now really, for Australia, the main game, the only game in town, given what's going on in the world. Yet it also strikes me that the nature of warfare is changing, and we in Australia have to be ready. In the past 2 weeks, we have seen, of course, first Ukrainians launch an attack with drones that took out something like a third of Russia's nuclear-capable long-range bombers. And then Israel, just in the past few days, decapitated Iran's nuclear program as well as their Revolutionary Guard, again, with drones being a big part of the picture. And great for them, but let's remember, the good guys don't always win, and the bad guys have access to the same technology, because in just the past 2 weeks, not just the past 2 weeks, but the past 2 years have shown us what the wars of the future will look like for Australia as well. This next generation of warfare, driven by drones and other autonomous technology, not necessarily launched from an airbase or a carrier group, means that even seemingly ragtag enemies can make a lot of trouble for relatively little cost. Just look at what's been going on in the Red Sea, where Iran's backed Houthi rebels from Yemen have launched a harassment campaign on global shipping that has forced, by some counts, nearly half of all container ships that would have once gone through the Red Sea to instead make their way around Africa at great cost. Now, Australia, too, guess what? We're incredibly vulnerable to this style of warfare. Before he died too young in 2023, ex-Major General turned Senator Jim Molan, who many of you will remember well, would warn anyone who would listen, and we talked about it a lot, that we needed to put our own jets under hardened shelters, anticipating exactly the sort of attack that devastated Russia's Air Force the other week. Yet, for the most part, our planes do not still have these hardened shelters, while facilities like our over-the-horizon radar network appear as virtually undefended, easy targets. Not only do we in Australia need to spend more on defense, but we need to spend smart to make sure we are not dealt out of the fight from the get-go.